Hello, gentles and ladymen. I am Bison Gaming, and I am joined by my good friend Platypus Slayer. What's up?
Hey, not much.
We are a bison and a platypus here together today, and we are going to be bringing you the ranged cavalry tier list. Now, these are all of the trainable ranged cavalry that are available by default, or not by default, but are available to all of these civilizations, to not include revolt units. If you are curious as to the more specifics of the criteria that we use for figuring what units go into these tier lists, please take a look at the video linked in the linked above. However, we are about to start here today. Our tier lists are scaled around the B rank, which means that is where most of our units should lie by the end of it. If you don't have anything to add, Platypus, I say we get started.
Sounds good to me, man.
All right. So where do you want to begin?
Maybe just with furthest left and just work our way through.
Okay. The furthest left is going to be the German Black Rider, and I feel like that's not the greatest starting units.
I mean, we could always start with the Great Goon with the Bow Rider.
That's true. Yeah. Let's start with the Bow Rider for Lakota. The Bow Rider is an Age 2 cavalry archer dragoon that has 1.5 fire rate, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
Quite a bit of HP, decent animations. I'm pretty sure they fire at the beginning of their animation, not at the end, right?
Correct. So there's still a little bit of a setup
Yeah.
between shots, but yeah, it's crisp.
Yes. And then they have 10% melee rolls, not ranged, right? They're melee.
They are melee resist, yes.
Yes. And then they have, I think, a negative multi. Now, these guys used to be like S tier, make these in H2 all day long because they have no negative multiplier against settlers. However, if I'm not mistaken, all of Lakota's cavalry got a negative multiplier attached to settlers now, and they have to use a big button to remove it, or is it the other way around? And it's they start with no negative multiplier against settlers, and then all the Lakota units get one after an upgrade.
So the Bow Rider has a negative to Vil's base, right? But it's a 0.75, so it's higher than your normal goon, meaning that they do more damage to villagers.
Yes.
So
they used to have no negative multiplier, though. And I'm pretty sure there's still a way to remove it.
Something like that. I do know if you send a HP card in H4 that it actually decreases the multiplier, aka meaning less damage to villagers.
Yes. But in any case, it's an Age 2 Dragoon with high HP, high DPS. You never have to worry about its population. It's fast because of the Lakota Warchief aura, so there's no reason to put it anywhere other than like S tier.
Yeah, I mean, this thing like almost hard counters specific civs, right?
Yeah.
Like if your opponent opens stable and you open Bow Rider, like
they can't win. Straight up.
It's an incredible unit, incredible value. It's the bane of anyone who's ever had a bad herd versus Lakota.
I hate Lakota. I despise Lakota with a burning passion, and a big chunk of that is because of the Bow Rider. Before we continue, today's video is brought to you by my very first sponsor. Yes, really, please don't skip. It's Pixel Buggy, one of our buddies in the Discord. Pixel is a commission-based for-hire digital artist, and he's a good friend of mine, he's a good friend of my friends, and he's a good friend of the Sunbros clan and the whole Sunbros community as a whole. So, go to Pixel for your art stuff. Support small business. Pixel actually designed my new YouTube logo and made this channel banner that I plan on using in various projects. So yeah, take a look at that. I just changed my my logo to something a little bit more professional and Bison based because I did change my name to Bison Gaming, and thanks to Pixel, that got off the ground really, really well. Now, normally I do like to do my own art for the channel, as seen with my own Bison avatars that I have everywhere in my videos, but when you're trying to get a refined look for channel branding, things like, my YouTube logo, it's really tough to beat a professional artist. I mean, look how good, my new logo looks. It's great. Pixel can be reached out via the Sunbros Discord server or by his custom website linked in the description below. Also by the Discord, by his Discord user, which is also linked in the description below. He specializes in logos and characters and chibi characters, especially, and emojis and all that good stuff. He is gonna love to have you. Tell him I sent you if you hear from this, and go talk to Pixel. So thank you very much, Pixel, for sponsoring the video. And now back to ranking Dragoons. All right,
Yeah.
let's throw something in the D tier to help balance this out, so we get an idea of what's at the top and what's at the bottom. What do you think is like the worst goon in the game?
You know, I would probably have to say that, and I'm a little bit biased, yes, but I think the Keshig, even with its recent like snap lock, target lock ability, is a D tier, just because the banners that it come with, they really don't have a lot of use for China in the later game in most circumstances, right? Like, you're either locked with bringing a pike, or you're locked bringing a step rider, both which, like, especially with the nerfs to Old Han Reform, they're just not fantastic units.
Yeah.
I really think
it would be Keshiks. I agree that Keshiks would be a lot better if you could get a Keshik Arquebuser banner army.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what would be really helpful here. But I fully agree. I hate China's banner army system. I'm notorious for hating it, and as such, I often underrate units. But if you're agreeing with me that Keshiks are one of the worst units out there, then yeah, we'll put it in D tier.
You know what I mean? Like, they're better than nothing, but I mean, China's weak to heavy cap, and part of it's like the Keshik stats are just so squishy. It's not impressive base. The banner system, kind of makes it worse. Changes to Old Han Reform have kind of hurt it. It's not like worthless, but every time you make these units, you're going to be feeling like, ugh.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's see here. How about the good old French Dragoon?
I feel like it's a pretty solid A tier goon. I mean, it's got Cav combat. It's paired with like one of the best skirms in the entire game, the French skirm, or French Hussar. Like, it's got what do you call it? It can be cheaper with the H4 card. If you revolt into Revolutionary France. These things are ridiculous.
You cut out there a little bit there, but
oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I agree. If they get cavalry combat that actually affects the goons, because not all cavalry combat does, and they pair well with like the Vortigers, like they're an A tier goon. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and I said like the sneak surprises. If you go Revolutionary France, I don't know when I called out, they get even just ridiculous like stats. Mm-hmm. Should you ever make it that long?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the tricky part, isn't it?
Yeah.
Should you ever make it that long? All right.
Exactly.
Let's see here. What about Mexico? I don't really see Dragoons used a whole lot with Mexico, and I think it's because, while Mexico does have a lot of upgrade cards and a Royal Guard upgrade for the Saltador, which turn into Vigilantes, like, they generally are, like, Mexico generally has better options for the endgame. I see people usually just go Soldados and call it a day, or Chinacos even, but I rarely ever see goons used for Mexico.
If we were to use B as like a good solid like tier, I mean, they have Cav combat. They do have that weird Queen's Dragoon, and they have that weird one where your Soldados turn into goons, but like, you'll never see those. Maybe in Treaty, that's a thing, but in Supremacy, no. I'd say they have Cav combat. They can pair well with Salties. Solid B tier.
Yeah, we'll put it here for now. I'm a little skeptical on it. I think maybe it's a top of C tier type of thing, but yeah, we'll put it there for now. Let's see here. Man, we're moving through this a little bit faster than I usually do. Okay, let's talk about the Russian Cavalry Archer. How about that?
Ooh.
Now, these guys got area of effect and a higher melee attack recently with the Savonia card, I think it is, the one that gives Strelets their melee attack. It also affects Cavalry Archers and gives them area of effect. Not that useful, I don't think, though, because why would you make these guys why would you make these guys for hand cavalry purposes when you have the not the Cossack. Why would you make these when you have the Cossack for a hand a cavalry option? You know.
Yeah, these are kind of awkward unit, like Cav Archers, both of them, right? Really, all Cav Archers but the Bow Rider. They tend to be kind of awkward units. Like their animations are a bit awkward. They have melee armor, but then they kind of want to be shooting most of the time, right?
Yeah.
These things
They also
are
have
solid.
slower speed. They're 6.75. I'm pretty sure.
I think they're up to 7 now. A couple patches ago. So because Russia gets Cav combat and it also gets Sovnia and it also gets Royal Guard. Like these are kind of like the Mexico level, right? Where it's like they're decent.
The thing is, though, is
like if your opponent's going like really heavy on the Cav, I don't know. Finish.
They don't really pair well with the Strelet, though. Like there are better things to pair with the Strelet, and the Strelet is kind of like it does make a Dragoon technically, but there are better things to pair with the Strelet, I feel. For example, just Ruskets will serve your anti-cavalry just fine, and they make them out of the same barracks blockhouse building, you know?
Yeah, I mean, when you usually see these things, it's against either mass artillery or like the super heavy cav, like Crossier or Spahi, right?
Yeah. Yeah, there's a reason that Russia's best anti-cav is the Manchu shipment.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. You know what I mean? Like these things, I would say like top of C or maybe mid as it goes on. Like they do their job, but like you're not teching Strelet Goon if you have a choice. You know what I mean? Like the French Goon is like a tactical choice that you like want to.
Yeah, that's true.
Like right? Where this is like, ugh.
This is like, oh god, I need anti-cav right now. This'll do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Exactly.
Alright, let's talk about the Ottoman cavalry archer by comparison.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's much better. I think it's better than the Mexico one.
Ooh.
And the reason is simply because you can get a card in H3 that gives them a multiplier against villagers. That's all there is to it.
So, maybe annoying factor. Like obnoxious, like please God, Ottoman, don't you have enough freaking ways to like do a million things? Like why do you need this card? Yep, and they have flight archery in H4 now as well, right? So then their animation's better, so they can kite like bow riders, because that's what Ottoman needed, right? Was everybody was like, please give Ottoman bow riders.
I don't understand why they keep giving Ottoman new things, new toys.
Their Istanbul shall forever remain Istanbul. But in all.
Oh, geez, you are cutting in.
Seriously,
and out
I would say
of
outside
video.
of maybe team situations for that. Oh, Jesus, I'm so sorry. I don't even know what to say other than Alaskan internet. I have no idea. Nothing's running right now. We did have a snowstorm in April, so. All I was gonna say is the Ottoman Cav Archer probably is like the same tier as the Russian one. Like outside of being really freaking annoying, right? If they didn't have Obis, the most overpowered skirm at this moment of this video, to back up the Cav Archers, like they would just. Ottoman used to be really weak to heavy Cav, specifically because their Cav Archers just cannot perform with the Ottoman eco as like a cheap goon. It doesn't synergize at all.
But I have seen Ottoman players nowadays just go full cavalry archer, and it's really weird to see. But it's a thing, and if they choose to just ignore your army, run around, and kill settlers all day, like, you're fucked. Really.
Yeah, I mean, I guess with some of the chain, like I said, flight archery, and I think flight archery even buffs them now, so maybe that pushes them over the edge. Like I said, it's not a great unit, but it has, I guess, its utility. Like I said,
it serves its purpose. Yeah, it serves its purpose, and it does it well.
Yeah. Should have your own separate Ottoman tier.
Yeah, just Ottoman SABC.
It's like to the side where it's like it doesn't even matter if this unit because it's being paired by Obis.
Yeah. Having Ottomans having Obis in their arsenal automatically makes like all of their other units except for other skirmishers higher on the tier list.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Good old musket rider for Haudenosaunee. I think that's just a standard B tier goon, right?
Yeah, it used to be better. It's taken like a range resist nerf, and it took another nerf at the beginning of DE, and yeah,
But like,
it's
it serves its purpose. It's a solid goon. It does its job. It's a musket rider. It
yeah,
also is paired with the forest prowler, which is really good.
exactly. Like the only thing holding, I think, really this thing back is the fact it's 100 coin, which with Hod's eco is like not
Yeah,
not
if I'm
wonderful.
not
But
mistaken, most Hot and Shiny players get these from shipments at first, right? For that exact reason.
well, yes. So you start off with a shipment of musket riders, and then you often have to go to other shipments to make a 3 unit comp, just because it's hard to produce these things in mass.
Mm-hmm.
They're good.
The Hacker Pellets. This unit has gone through a lot of changes since I last did my tier list 6 months ago. This unit used to be a heavy cavalry unit, then they reworked it into a Dragoon unit that functions like a heavy cav unit and was hilariously broken, and then they reworked it again into a normal Dragoon unit. And I am so confused on where to place these guys now, because I haven't really experienced them much since their nerf. The most encounter I ever got with Hacker Pellets was at the height of their OP-ness in the early Dragoon days, when they had like gigantic amounts of melee attack.
Yeah, these things really fell off.
I don't know how good they are now.
They're definitely worse than they were, and sometimes it's hard to tell if that's like a nerf whiplash or like legitimately they got hit too hard with the bat. But I almost want to say like a C tier, just because like I don't like the bottom of C tier. Like they're not horrible. Like they do have high damage. They have the area effect. You can make them in age 2, right, with the card.
Mm-hmm. The problem I see with Hacker Pellets is that Sweden has no skirmisher to pair with the Hacken Pellet unless you send for Jaegers. And that really hurts because you don't have a Skarngoon option. And if you do want to, if you do want to counter, because one of the reasons that the Hack Pellet was so good is because its melee attack also works against also works against other Dragoons, because its melee attack had a multiplier against all cav instead of just heavy cav, right?
Correct.
And as such, it was one of Sweden's actual answers to the Dragoon, which is a unit that they otherwise really don't have any units of multipliers against. Kind of like Aztec and Skirmishers, right?
Correct.
But now that it's just used for fighting heavy cavalry, you know what else fights heavy cavalry from range and does a better job of being resource and population efficient? The Carolean.
Yeah, exactly.
So what,
with more range.
Yeah, with more range. So what purpose do we have? And they even have high melee too, which they took away from the Hacker Pellet. So it's like, what do I build these for? They used to be Caroleans but fast, but now they're just shitty low range goons with some area of effect. And Sweden is back to having its issue of not being able to counter goons. Now, I'm in no way saying they should rebuff this thing back to what it was, that the Sweden can counter goons, because no thank you, sir. But it does leave the question of, like, what is this unit for, exactly,
I think that's a great summary of it. Like, on its stats, it's not necessarily terrible. There's probably some civs, China, that would like kill for something like this, right? But at the end of the day, you already have the Carolean, which has more range. It's already kind of a fast musket. All the upgrades that affect the Hacker Pellet do affect the Huss, but then it's like, why not just
make Huss? Yeah.
So
at least that'll pair better with Caroleans.
Yeah, exactly. So I really just don't see this thing having a lot of utility in the current meta.
Mm-hmm. Should we put it in C or D?
I think D is fair, just because it's not a bad unit. Like, too bad you can't put like an asterisk. Like, we're not saying, well, just like the Keshig though, right? Like the Keshig is not in and of itself completely worthless, but it just has no function.
Yeah, it has no function. That's a good point. Yeah, that's a good distinction right there. What do you say we go over the trinity of one pop goons now?
Ooh, let's do it.
All right, starting with Reuters. Reuters for Dutch. I see nowhere to go other than S tier with these.
So I have, like, the more that I've played, I've cooled off a lot on the Reuters, and I think the the thing about Reuters is like they need specific kind of things to be like overpowered, right?
They need lots of artillery or lots of skirms, both of which Dutch can afford very easily.
Yes, they're great with Dutch, right? Because of the coin.
Which is the context here. This that
yes.
They're Dutch Reuters, because no other city can get them.
Because they're cheap, like certain stats though don't affect them. Like cav combat does not affect them as much as it would a normal goon because they have such low stats base. So even though they're one pop, they really don't take buffs as well as other civs like ranged carousel, cav combat. I think that's it. That's the only upgrades Dutch really get for them, other than Royal Guard, which again is a weaker on this goon because it's less than others. It's of course paired with the Dutch skirm, which is amazing. So, I kind of feel like instead of like S, like more like a top of A maybe kind of thing. Because like by themselves, they can be a real problem and almost like a handicap for Dutch. But then we've all like dealt with the guy who runs around with goons that fit into a tiny hole in your wall and then like spend the entire game just giving you the runaround.
That's one of the big things I love about the Reuter is that they pack in very tightly compared to other Dragoons, and that's even a problem with like Javelin Riders, for example. Javelin Riders are technically better. They have better stats, I think, than Reuters on a 1-to-1 basis, but the Reuters pack in so tightly that you tend to get more shots off, and they tend to work more favorably in that regard. I think they're personally an S because of the function. Yes, you are absolutely right in that they don't get quite as much from cavalry combat, but at the same time, 2 Reuters is worth 1 Dragoon in population, and they got higher stats than a Dragoon combined, so they're getting higher stats from cavalry combat combined than 1 Dragoon would.
Sort of. And then I would say the other downside to the Reuter, because it's kind of corner case, but it's kind of important, is they're really terrible at taking down artillery, which luckily Dutch can afford culverins, right?
Yes.
So it's like not as big of an issue, but
the big function is that Dutch has 1 billion coin, and they can easily afford lots of cannons and lots of skirms. And the big thing that cannons and skirms struggle against is cavalry, and that's where the Reuter comes in. Now, obviously, if you're running skirms, then you're also going to be weak to artillery, and you are correct in that the Reuter does not help as much as other goons in that regard. But especially if your Dutch player just chooses to go like Reuter horse artillery or Reuter heavy cannon with a couple culverins mixed in, like, good luck,
Yeah, it definitely is. Like I said, it's a strong unit.
That, like, it's not the strongest under every circumstance because of that, and put it in A, though. It's top of A, though.
Yeah. Which is, kind of ironic, too, because I would say the French Goon Skirm combo, for example, is really deadly sometimes in the late game against Dutch, because France also has more pop speed. It's really fascinating sometimes how the late game shifts, but I do agree. Like, when that power spike hits in Age 3, like, there's just a bunch of these little turds running around, sniping at your vills, fitting into cracks. Like, they're just like...
Like, the first thing... And Dutch have really good shipments for these, too.
Oil, they're just everywhere. And you're slipping all over the place.
The Dutch have really good shipments for these. Like, the first thing that a Dutch player is going to do when they hit Age 3 is send, like, 9 and 8 Reuters.
That's true.
It's such a good shipment,
True. Shipment value is definitely important on this one. So, yeah, I think A's good.
Okay, we'll put them in A. But what will be going in S is not so much anymore. I was going to say the Eagle Runner Knight, but not so much anymore. We'll talk about them later, actually. Let's finish the Trinity of 1 pop goons. Which, actually, we'll finish with the Eagle Runner Knight, I suppose. It's not really a goon, but,
It's a 2-legged goon.
It's kind of a goon.
That's why it's 1 pop.
That's why it's on this list. It's kind of a goon, but also not really. Alright, Zambarax. For India.
I feel like A tier, where it's like, it depends on how much your micro is. Like, these things are so squishy, but like, they're so fast. They're so deadly. Did I cut out?
Yeah, you did for a second there. I mean, they have 7... I thought these guys were fast too, but, they just have 7.25 speed. That's the standard goon speed.
Don't they have, doesn't Desert Terror or something like that buff them?
I don't think so. I think Desert Terror increases their multipliers.
Okay.
I think it's sours that are faster than normal, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh nope, they're according to the app, they are 7.5 speed, so it's a little bit faster.
Well, I mean, the app's also usually correct, but not always.
Yes. Looking at it, and yes, it does add, like I said, the extra multiplier with the Desert Terror.
So yeah, these guys are one-pop Dragoons, like the Reuter. They're also Age 2, which is something that the Javelin Riders and the Zambraks definitely have over the Reuter, which I always give big points for early access, you know? That's one of the big reasons the Bow Riders in the S tier right now. They are fast, but the problem with these guys is that it's like you were saying, they are the squishiest fucking units on planet Earth. And they have low attack and like 120 HP or something dumb like that. And they don't have any extra range either. So, you know, all that movement speed doesn't help if your enemy just has the same range as you with a musketeer. You know, so it's if your opponent chooses to make musketeers, like, you should switch units quickly.
Yeah, you know, like,
and then I also think that the Howdah is just better than them once you reach the third age, and I feel like not only that, but like it's not like India's lacking in anti-cavalry. Like, sure, the Sepoy was nerfed in its melee, but like the Rajaput is really, really solid now. Rajaput's really, really good in Age 2, and I just don't see a whole lot of use for the Zambrak.
I think the thing about the Zambrak, you know, is, again, in certain cases, it's an instant game winner. Like, if you're up against Germany and they open stable, like, you open Zams and you've effectively countered their Civ bonus.
That's true. Yeah.
They're so good because, again, they're fast and they're H2, so like you can't even run away from these things with Cav. And you also have the Gurkha to pair with it, which is not the best scaling skirm, but it's a very solid skirm.
It's a good skirm, and it also makes India one of the only civs that has a skirm Dragoon combo in H2. Not that it's a fantastic one, but it exists. You know.
Yeah. So like I feel like they're like good solid A. Like you said, I totally agree with you though. You have to babysit these things. Like, you look away from the screen for a second, and like you said, muskets or skirms get on them, and it's.
I was giving all these negative points because I wanted to put them in C tier. Like, they're good very situationally, and then in all those circumstances, I'd rather have other units.
I feel like they're at least a B, just because, like, in those circumstances, they are so good to open with. And, like, India, there's a lot of matchups it likes to open up with Sepoy and Zambraks when it can. But I guess if we're thinking a C is, like, niche, as in, like, you're not using it all the time. So maybe just like to clarify, this isn't like they're bad units. It's just, like you said, India already has plenty of options, and it doesn't necessarily need the Zambraks. And I think that makes sense.
Yeah, because I view them very similarly with the Cavalry Archer. Like, under the right circumstances, yeah, they can do a lot of shit, but like they're not going to be your go-to. They're not even going to be your go-to anti-cavalry. They're only going to be your go-to anti-cavalry if your opponent is only making cavalry. You know.
Right, or like that speed, or you want to raid him back, right? Because again, with 7.5, like, even other goons sometimes can't catch him, which can be really.
I think, isn't their base damage like 13 with a 0.5 times multiplier against settlers? Good luck.
It's a 15, but again, I mean, it's all about speed, right? Yeah, I mean, it's like I said, it's all about the speed. I guess up close they do a little bit better with the melee.
Yeah, probably. All right, let's talk about let's talk about the Ethiopian and Hausa Javelin Riders. They're pretty much They're pretty much neck and neck. They're like the same unit, obviously. I generally think highly of the Ethiopia one over the Hausa one, though. I don't know about
really.
Yes. Because they pair with the Neftenya, and they also get a combat card in H3 that's 20% attack and 10% extra range resistance, which I think is insanely good.
Damn. I didn't know about the last part. I know Hausa has the one that adds, I think, an extra multiplier to their Javelin Riders, right? As well as some combat stats, but I believe it's only like 10%. I'm going to look it up. Well.
And then, yeah,
they both I mean, I think both of these things are probably, like, to me, A-tier goons, right?
They both have really good cards. They're both really solid. I think we can agree that they're both going in the A-tier, for sure.
Yeah, like they come out in age 2, so you can mass them early. I mean, they've had to nerf this thing. I think someone on Reddit said like 4,000 times.
Yeah, it's pretty accurate.
You know,
Uh,
they're still really good goons. Like even although they've taken nerf after nerf after nerf, and both civs, whether it's the soon to be buffed Fulani, or of course the Neftenia, the gods of treaty skirm wars, right? Like these things are good, man.
Yeah, they are, for sure. Ethiopia also has a card that allows all of its units to heal slowly, heal 1 HP per second all the time, even in combat, which is insane.
Jeez.
So it also has just 5% extra hit points. So there are so many things that Ethiopia has going for it with the Neftenia and the Javelin Rider that like I've only seen. Let me put it this way: I've only seen Javelin Riders not do their job one time ever, and you want to know what that was? It was the that was the game in the tournament. That was the game in the 2v2 tournament about 6 months back or so, when I was in the Imperial Age and had coffee mill gun like 18 Gatling guns. Back when they didn't have their as high of a negative multiplier, as low of a negative multiplier against cavalry, and it just shredded the Javelin Rider mass because Javelin Riders generally have low HP, and coffee mills excel against that. But that's the only time I have ever not experienced Javelin Riders kick ass.
Yeah.
Is under the very specific situation of Imperial coffee mill Gatling guns.
I mean, yeah, that basically sums it up. Like these are literally workhorse units, man. Like if you're opening as an African civ, like there's almost no reason not to have these things mixed into your composition. Like they even have good melee attack for like what it's worth. They're pretty fast, with their fire rate. Like they have an extra the normal goon I think against artillery. Like they're just really good.
Yeah, they are. I generally think that with the economy that Hausa and Ethiopia have available to them, I think the Reuter comes out on top just because of economy and functionality in that regard. Because I don't think that Hausa and Ethiopia are particularly weak to cavalry with their other unit comps, but Dutch is, because they don't even have a musketeer,
Yes.
And they have a big focus on artillery, and because that the Reuter has a much more important place in Dutch's unit composition. So I think that's the reason they edge it out over the Javelin Riders, despite the Javelin Riders being an age earlier and generally having as good or better stats.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable.
Okay, let's see here. Rifle Riders. A tier, right?
Yeah, these are so weird. Here's the problem with Rifle Riders, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the units that they counter is basically okay. So you have the Bow Rider.
Here's the okay. So if I might say something, Rifle Riders, they don't counter a unit; they counter a unit composition.
Yes.
Because most of your compositions are designed to fight like all five, and your two generic unit compositions are going to be Skirm Goon or Musk Huss with maybe some artillery, right? And Rifle Riders counter Musk Huss and artillery, but they are countered by Skirmisher Dragoon. So if your opponent goes with one unit composition, you can end the entire game with a monocomp. And if your opponent goes with the other composition, you can't use this unit or you will die and lose the game.
Yeah, yep. They're even kind of squishy too for like the amount of resources that you have to pump into them. So it's like, yeah, they're really odd. It's like, now that you mention it, it's like, yeah, it's almost like a coin toss kind of unit. Like when you need them, they're fantastic. And most people though, because Lakota is the Cav Civ, they're probably going to have some goon out, right?
Yes.
So maybe with the changes to light infantry, we might see more use of Rifle Riders, right? Because there's more likely to be more Musk Huss as the meta continues to evolve. But I almost want to put them in the C tier, not because their stats are bad. Like these are really good. Like you're right. You get like 20 of these on a Musk Huss composition, and they just delete them instantly.
Yeah.
The downside being how often
how often is anybody going to use Muscos against
someone going to like not have goons?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like like I guess Sweden might not, because it doesn't have a choice.
Yeah.
So yeah, I feel like they should be C tier just because, like, why not go bow? Okay, you have better options, right? If you're dealing with Musk, you do have skirms in the form of Wakina, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have the bow rider. You even have axe riders to deal sometimes with like certain units like Ulons and whatnot. So or try to get on artillery or tank. It's just they're so good, but they kind of struggle, I think, to get into the common Lakota mixture, which usually is Wakina plus either bow rider or axe rider, the majority. But yeah, I'm sure Sweden hates that unit.
Yeah, I'm willing to bet it's the bane of Sweden's existence. Although, actually, wait, no! Because Karolian's got a multiplier right back. Because they're heavy cav.
Oh yeah.
They just counter each other. It's just a shootout.
Jeez. With Torp Eco versus Lakota Eco, I think I know who wins that one.
Karolians can get range resistance, too.
That's right, yeah, with Sevilla Lifeguard.
It would be a close battle, I think. I think the Karolian multiplier is not as good as the Rifle Rider multiplier, but they would certainly trade a lot more cost-effectively with them than other musketeers.
And like Lakota doesn't want to be breaking even in its fights.
Yeah.
It wants to be a bully, not break even.
Yeah.
So yeah, I feel like they're kind of niche units. But again, super strong, and we've all been just absolutely shredded by these ones.
Yeah, so we penalize these two for being niche, but these guys have a much bigger niche compared to these guys. Yeah, we that's what you talk about the Zambarak and Russian cavalry archer. All right, what do you say we finish off the Dragoons?
Okay, because a lot of these will be pretty simple.
Yeah. Let's start with two that I know we can put. Well, actually, yeah. Let's start with one that I know we can put in the B tier, and that's just the Malta one.
Yep.
It's a goon. It has 10% extra stats. They're a little bit more expensive, but you can get a card to fix that. They can teleport around the map from their stables. It's cool. It's a goon. It's a good goon. It's a really good goon, just because it can teleport, and it gets 10% extra stats and shadow techs. But that's it. That's it.
That's it. Yeah. It's a goon. It does its job. It's got some trade-offs, with no cav combat, but then it's got Royal Guard essentially. So
it's no cav combat, but it's got Royal Guard, and it can teleport, which is cool as shit, and shadow techs.
Yeah.
But it's a good goon. It does its job.
Does its job, I guess. The only problem it has is Pike Expo. Yeah. The only thing that it's like would hold it back at all would be the fact that like Malta likes to Pike Expo a lot. But like now that that's kind of been changed, I think we will see a lot more goon compositions mixed into Malta.
Yeah, I used to make goons quite a bit because they pair well with fire throwers, which I love.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Oof. Late game. Oof.
Also, the one we can fit into the B tier is Italy.
Yeah.
Now, Italy have this weird thing where they have two different skirmishers, one that is available in age early and one that is available in age late. And in between them, available in age 3, is the Dragoon. And the Pavasiers are good. They're much tankier than crossbows, and they can adjust their resistances. It's pretty cool. They're not great. They're good. They're not great. And then the Bersaglieri is one that I punish all the time in all of my tier lists for being locked until age 4. And sitting in the middle is this Dragoon, which pairs well with either of them, but not great with either of them. And I feel like that goes for a lot of Italy's units, where like a lot of I feel like a lot of Italy's primary like trainable units are not meant to carry the fight, but just support their specialty units,
Yeah.
And I feel like this unit falls into that, because Italy has like this almost France-like syndrome where you can upgrade all of their units. They all have cards that upgrade them, but none of them are the best in any of their fields.
Yeah, and not only and you can't always fit all of it in one deck anyways, right? So like the goon, all it needs is Cav combat, and that's all it gets, and that's it.
Yeah, exactly. Likewise, we can put Spain in here as well. I think they're going to go ahead of Italy, though, because they do get Unction, and they also pair with a better skirmisher that scales well into Age 3.
Yeah, I totally agree on that one. That makes perfect sense.
In fact, I think the Spain one should go in front of the Maltese and the Mexico as well.
Yeah. I mean, that's because, again, Unction really does make a big difference on damage output, which is really important for a ranged unit.
Mm-hmm. All right, now this is an interesting one. The USA Dragoon. Now, one patch ago, I would have put the USA Dragoon here, or even like maybe here. And the reason is because you get a really nice big batch of them with your 10 USA with your 10 Armand's Legion shipment. Now they are locked behind a shipment, which does suck, but it's a really good shipment. And then you can train them out of forts. And the reason that I put them in B tier is because they were like USA's only good Dragoon. But Carbine Cavalry got changed and buffed in this most recent patch, and now I feel like there's not really a huge place for these guys anymore, and that Armand's Legion is kind of a redundant card now, in all honesty, because it costs 1,000 resources to send. But why would I do that when I can instead use those 1,000 resources to make almost as many like Carbine Cavalry, and then just send Buffalo Soldiers for the upgrade instead?
No, I agree, especially with the recent buffs to Buffalo Soldiers.
And because of that, I think USA is probably the only actual physical Dragoon unit that's going to go into the D tier, because I don't really see a place for them anymore in the USA cards. Like I used to advocate taking these over Pulaski's Legion and to put them in every USA deck, and now I just can't see it anymore.
Yeah, no, I agree, just because, again, they seem completely supplanted by the Carbine Cavalry. So
yes, which is a good thing, I'm telling you, because like it sucked having to have an Age 3 1,000 resource shipment in order to make Dragoons, but like, yeah, that's my thought.
Yeah, no, I agree.
And then let's see here. The British Dragoon it's a good goon, but you're pairing them with longbows or rangers instead of skirmishers, which aren't as good.
Yeah, like these things stat-wise are crazy. Like they're almost as good as Port Goons,
but Ports have Cassadors.
Yeah, which like function. I guess the Rangers keep on getting buffed. Like maybe someone smarter will figure out how to like slot Rangers in, consistently, and then suddenly the fact that all their cavalry cards affect goons too.
Yes.
It will be a huge deal. And in team games, the Brit Goon is absolutely amazing, right?
Mm-hmm. I had in that aforementioned game where I shredded Ethiopian Javelin Rider or House of Javelin Riders with Imperial Gatling guns. Like my teammate Steven was monocomping goons.
Yeah.
To cover for it, and it worked.
Yeah, I mean they're amazing. I would put them like top of B then, maybe, right? Because like it's like they're super good, or maybe low A. Because
I'd say top of B is fair.
Yeah, it's just, again, the longbow, the macro's awkward, right? To macro those two, and the Rangers they haven't quite dialed in if this unit is like viable or not for Brits, especially with the changes to settlers. So we'll see.
Now the Portuguese Dragoon is like USA. It's going to be the outlier goon, in that it's going all the way to the S tier. I don't think it's as good as the Bow Rider, because it's locked till Age 3 for one, among other things. But this guy is a monster, because unlike Cavalry combat, which is 15%, Dragoon combat is 20%, on top of a Royal Guard upgrade, and a card that gives them 4 extra range, making them just legends at kiting. Like, these guys shred fucking everything. And they're good. They're really good. They're really good. They also pair well with the Cassador, which is like one of the premier Portuguese units,
Yeah, it just does amazing things. And the combat cards is in H2. Ports usually, H3, but it's better than Cav combat, right? And now that the ports have a good card in constables, right? It's like that kind of stings a tiny bit, but it still is not taken away the fact that 20% goons beats the goon more. Ports are really safe in getting to age 3. They can usually consistently get to age 4 if they're not already wrecked. And then age 4 hits, and these things just go off the freaking rails.
Yeah.
So.
What's the one thing Portugal players do when they age to age 3? They ship castors and train goons.
Yep.
That's what they
do.
do.
Now it's the organ guns. And it's like, good luck sniping the organ guns with these goon.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just amazing. It's an amazing.
Yeah.
Unit, definitely the best goon, standard template goon.
Agreed by far. All right, now let's take it. Let's talk about. So we mentioned these earlier. Carbine Cavalry has just swapped places with the USA goon. They just swapped places with this recent update. That's all that happens. I would actually put them up here. No, they're not as important for USA as most good writers are for having to show you. But so the Carbine Cavalry got an update recently that makes it so that they no longer fire in 2 shots. Which is weird because they still have 2 shots in their animation, but you can move as soon as you fire the first one, which is kind of funny. And it does the full damage in 1 shot now, which is amazing. Because they had 2.25 speed, which means these guys kite a lot easier than other Dragoons, but still have high DPS. It's like they have all the benefits that cavalry archers have, but none of the downsides with bad fire animation and slow movement speed. Which is cool, which is really cool. And they only have 10% range resistance, but you can upgrade it to 20%, along with a 15% attack boost. And they also have a custom Imperial model that looks sexy as fuck.
That was pretty cool.
Have you seen the Imperial model for Carbines before?
I have, now that they're not relegated as a meme.
Yeah.
I have actually seen them recently. They're really cool.
They look like that dude from Night at the Museum.
I never thought of that, but yeah, they're good, and their animation, the way that the devs worded it, it seems kind of awkward, but the animation is smooth. You know what I mean? Ironically, the way they explained it was kind of weird, but to anyone that's coming back, check these things out, man. They're definitely much improved.
Yeah. All right. Let's see. How about the Sweden Black Rider goes next? D tier. Below the Keshik even, and so these are specifically these are specifically the Sweden Black Riders that Sweden get as their goons by shipping them and then being able to train them from stables. Now Sweden gets a combat card for these guys, which is pretty cool. Sweden's cavalry combat in particular, I think it specifically names the Hackapellet and the Hussar, so it doesn't actually affect the Armored Pistoliers. But and that's actually the same with a lot of these special trainables that you can get through cards. But these guys are really expensive, and they don't fill any holes that the Carulian doesn't already fill, because once again they just counter heavy cav, and it's not like the Carulian is bad in melee either.
Yeah. I can honestly say, maybe in Treaty you might see these, but I've never seen them in a Supremacy game of team or 1v1.
Yeah. Now, on the other hand, let's talk about Germany and their triple goons extravaganza, because Germany is one of the few civs with 3 goons, just like USA. Where do you want to start? Should we do the Black Rider to directly compare?
Yeah, I think that makes the most sense.
Okay.
Good segue.
Black Rider, top of C tier, I think, for Germany. And they're expensive, but Germany, they're expensive, but the thing is that they pair well with other German units really, really well. For one thing, Germany has something that Sweden's never heard of called the fucking Skirmisher.
Yeah.
But also, you can get trainable access to these through the Mercenary Camps card. You also get a good shipment of them, of 9, whereas other civilizations, I think, get 7 for the same price. Because LOL Germany, Yeah.
Yulon tax.
Yeah, exactly. But these guys, specifically when you get mercenary camps, you're not only getting access to the Black Rider, you're getting access to the Jaeger and the Pandor, which also work really well with these guys better than Sweden's Black Riders. You're also getting the Landsknechts, which is a heavy infantry that also pairs well with the German Landsknechts. So, like, even though it's not the best goon mercenary in the game, the fact that is that when you get trainable access to it with Germany, you also get trainable access to, like, every other German mercenary that pairs well with the Black Rider as a unit comp, and you can go full mercenaries by sending improved mercenaries right afterwards, which is the same bonus that Sweden gets with 20%.
Yeah. No, it's
you cut out.
Totally agree there. Like, it's, if you're going all mercs, like, it's a viable option. And oh, sorry, I was gonna say, if you're going all mercs, it's a totally viable option. It's probably more treaty or like 3v3 that you'll see this than like 1v1. But it has its use. Plus, it's really cool. Like, the Black Rider model is just so cool.
It is a sexy model for sure, and it's a cool portrait too. I love the feather in particular.
Yeah, it's a cool unit, and if you want to use it, go for it. Obviously, you know, the other options I think we'll talk about are probably more viable in like 1v1 or 2v2, but it's an option in teams.
Mm-hmm. All right, now let's talk about the War Wagon. This one I think is going to be probably debated a lot in my comment section, because I don't think highly of the War Wagon.
I will be the War Wagon stand then in this conversation.
So War Wagons are the same price and population as Cuirassiers, and they generally are, you know, they're about three Dragoons worth of population, right? But their kind of job is that they're kind of like a Dragoon and a half, which is kind of what they're supposed to be. But for one thing is they're slow, which I do not like. They're not as fast as other ranged cavalry. And they're kind of trying to want to be like this big tank that gets in the way and soaks up damage and shoots back pretty strongly. They even have decent siege at 30 siege, but you know, that's actually just 10 siege per population, which is better than Dragoons, I suppose, but not that much better. And it's just like, I don't see a lot of use for them, and they're also expensive as hell. They pair well with the Skirmisher, and they do have a decent, like, the 3 War Wagon shipment in H3 is pretty good, you know? But, like, they're slow, and that is a big deal for me. And they were better back in Legacy when they had more range, but in DE they took away the range bonus, and now they just have the same range as Musketeers at 12 range instead of 16. And I feel like the War
Wagons do have 16 still.
No, I'm pretty sure they nerfed the range.
I think they did nerf it, but it's 16 base, and it goes up to 18 with ranged carousel.
Can you double check that in game, because I'm like 90% sure they nerfed the range on this thing is lower than it used to be.
I just played Germans today, but while you continue to talk, I'll run a quick dev ASD in the background.
Okay, yeah. But yeah, I feel like the War Wagon is trying to be the Howdah, but it isn't as good as the Howdah, because the Howdah rules all. Is like my final opinion, words of opinion on it. What do you think of these guys?
So I really like the War Wagon. I do think, like I said, it's not a perfect unit. Like I said, it also has melee resist, which is always a mixed bag, right?
Yes. I forgot about that. Thank you for mentioning
Because on the one hand, you'll do better against cav that gets up close, but then, 16 ranged.
Oh, okay, so they buffed its range back up then. That's cool.
Yeah.
So that's the same range as a Howdah then. That's cool.
Yeah, so like the War Wagon, it does a lot of raw DPS, but like I said, the kiting animation, it has more range, but then its kiting is really terrible, right?
Yeah, not only does it have slower movement speed, but it takes forever to turn.
Exactly. Like, these things turn like the freaking Titanic, man. Like, it can be, especially because Germany is already kind of a finesse sieve. Their shipments, though, are great. It's just the raw amount of HP means that the Germany cavalry buffs, which do affect their War Wagons, really stack on these things. And, you know, because of they're so fat, like, you can kind of do stuff. Like, you can hide DOPS under them, you can hide cannons, you can kind of surround your skirms. There's a lot of utility if you're using the war wagons properly. But yeah, you leave them out in the field and skirms will eat these things alive, and they'll be just huge sink of resources. So I really think that they are like kind of a B, high B, bottom of A kind of thing. They work really well for what they do. Again, the extra range means that they'll even win sometimes in like versus musketeers and stuff because they can just nuke the musketeers down with their high 42 base.
Mm-hmm.
Just they're a really good unit, but they're also very expensive. And once the coin mines are out for Germany, your skirm's not that fantastic to begin with. Your shipments are, not your skirms themselves, and it's like, ugh.
Yeah.
So they go back and forth. You know what I mean? Like and it's funny that you say this because both this one is now being compared to the other one we'll do, and there's quite the lively debate with such easy range from, oh my god, this unit's crap and totally replaced now by the Chevrolet, to the Chevrolet's crap and you should only build war wagons because war wagons are S tier. So this is probably going to be contentious, but my instinct,
very contentious.
Yeah, it would be high B, low A for the war wagon.
And I think one of the other reasons that I'm wanting to rank it pretty lowly, because I want to put it in the C tier, is specifically because you can Germany now gets the Chevauchers as an infinite trainable in Age 3, which I think are ridiculous. And I think to just totally replace the war wagon in efficiency and just outright beat it.
Interesting. Yeah, maybe we should just go into a comparison of the two and then just wherever they fall from there, right? Like you might as well, because it is an interesting comparison between these two units. And again, they just recently got buffed, so before they definitely were not worth the value, and right now it's quite the lively debate.
Okay, so let's talk about the Chevaucher. We'll talk about these two units here at the same time: the Chevaucher and the war wagon. The Chevaucher, I think, is the best Dragoon in the game right now. Like, straight up, I think it's better than the Bow Rider.
You're not alone by saying that. I mean, like I said, there's quite a few people, including top players now on both sides, saying the Chevrolet, it's like a mini hack-a-pellet.
Yes, so the Chevaucher is the Chevaucher is a Dragoon that has every single thing that made hack-a-pellets broken back when they were at the height of their power. They even have longer range than hack-a-pellets, which is insane, and more HP. So the Chevaucher is a really tanky Dragoon. They're not quite as tanky as war wagons, but they're 2 population, so that's a big deal, right? But they're 2 population instead of 3, so that's a really big deal. So they end up being more tanky than war wagons in equal pop numbers. But they're just a super tanky goon that functions as a Dragoon. They're just a bunch of HP. It's fine. But then you put them in melee mode, and they have 40 fucking attack when you put in your combat cards in your Age 3 upgrade because they shadow tech from Age 2. And in fact, they shadow tech for quite. I don't actually think they shadow tech in Age 4 and 5. I think you had to purchase the upgrades.
Correct.
But the fact of the matter is, similar to the Rifle Rider, you can monocomp Chevauchers, and you can just win games with monocomps of it, and it actually works. And it's pretty depressing to see, and I discovered their ridiculous OP-ness because of a 2v2 game that me and my buddy played, where we made a push and tried to go both into Germany, and he 2v1'd our push with just Chevauchers, and then pushed into my base, and I switched completely into Rajaput, monocomped Rajaput, and he just went into melee with the Chevauchers and won. And it's ridiculous, because unlike the Rifle Rider, the Rifle Rider is a unit you monocomp to counter a unit composition. The Chevaucher is a unit that you can monocomp and just fight everything, including the units that are supposed to counter it.
Yeah, these things are pretty nutty in the melee sense. So right now I'm looking at both of them, and per pop and res, so it's the War Wagon is probably better against Cav, right? It's got more range, it's got higher multipliers, it has more HP, but it doesn't have the range resist.
Until the Cavalry just charge the War Wagon and then go into melee, in which case the Chevaucher wins.
Yeah, because it has almost twice, per pop, the melee damage than a veteran war wagon, right? So the war wagon's better at like range, but then it doesn't really kite as much. But then the Chevy's got I'm gonna call it the Chevy. Sorry.
Yeah, the war wagon is designed for fighting small groups of supporting Hussar. But if somebody monocomps Hussar, it's not going to perform as well. The Chevalger can fight everything.
The war wagon will beat because it's got the melee resist and yes. This thing is just it's pretty nutty. I would imagine in a situation with walls or some sort of choke point, maybe not as good, right? Because then the melee, it's not getting the same amount. But it's nasty. I've actually been playing some Germany recently, and I've sent this card a few times. And yeah, these things just clean out. This plus Ulans, like just the raw DPS of your cavalry is nutty. So
yeah, absolutely. What are the resistances on the Chevalger? Is it ranged or melee?
It's ranged.
Oh, even better. That's always an improvement. You always want ranged.
Yeah, so it does have lower because it's about 2/3 the res and population cost as a war wagon, right? So like 2 war wagons has 1,300 HP with the age 3 cards and whatnot, where the Chevalier has 1,000, right? So a little bit better than for the war wagon. The range damage is way more.
Yeah, the reason that Chevalgers are insane is because of their utility.
Twice as much?
Is because the amount of utility they have over the just pure range capabilities of the war wagon.
Yeah, and it's a really smooth firing animation too, so like that's kind of nice. So you can kite a little bit easier. Yeah, it's just good. It's a solid unit. I would say really at this point for Germany, the one thing that we could agree on, despite what you think about the war wagon or Chevalier, is they're both good. Like they're both fine. Like if you tuck into one or the other, you're not like handicapped like you would be with like the Sweden Black Rider or even the Black Rider in general sometimes, right? Like there's arguments for both, and I think it's a healthy thing. In my opinion, both of them are either B or A tier units.
Well, I'm personally just going to put the Chevalier at the top of S tier because it has the versatility of being an insane Dragoon while also being insane in melee. Of being a good Dragoon while also being insane in melee, so you can just fight its counters like skirmishers. But I will agree that the War Wagon deserves higher than the C tier that I wanted to put it.
Yeah, that might just be frustration from watching these things just derp around.
Yeah.
As you're trying to cut.
The problem I'm going to have playing Germany is that every second I have War Wagons, I'm going to think about how they're not Chevalgers.
Yeah, no, it's and again, like I wouldn't be surprised if we see some stat change. Yeah, I don't know. It's definitely whether or not it's OP or not is still like left to be decided. But I mean, the War Wagon's been around forever. It's a workhorse unit. Like it's a solid goon in my opinion.
There's also something to be said for that. As you were saying, the German skirmisher, while it does exist and makes Black Riders better, they aren't the best skirmishers in the universe, and so the War Wagon tends to fall off when you lose the unit that it pairs with as you scale into the late game, which is not as much of an issue for the Chevalger because it has a little bit more versatility in its usefulness. You can pair it with other units, which I think is another point in its favor. I'm going to put the War Wagon in the B tier above the Musket Rider.
Yeah.
How's that sound?
I can live with that.
Okay. Personally, I think Musket Riders are more important for Haudenosaunee than War Wagons are for Germany, but I will appease you and put them in the B tier.
Yeah. Gracias.
Alright, let's see here. How about Yabasume?
These things are weird.
They are weird. Aren't they mostly specialized in anti-artillery instead of anti-cavalry?
Yes.
Yeah. On one hand, it's a specifically anti-artillery Dragoon, which is kind of cool because the Flaming Arrow, if I'm not mistaken, only gets its multiplier in the 4th edge against artillery.
Something like that, yeah. I believe, yes, it's an age 4 ability where it becomes like a culverin.
The problem that I have with the Yabasume, and forgive me for saying this, Japan mains, but like, why would I make Yabasume for just anti-artillery unless the enemy is only going pure artillery? because I can make Naginata, and they do a wonderful job at fighting artillery, but they also, are function as lancers too. And like the reason you don't bring lancers against artillery is because Spanish lancers are like a pure anti-infantry unit. But one of the reasons that Naginata are like an S tier cav unit is because they can fight. They do the lancer job, but they can also fight everything else too, because they just have high base and a lower multiplier. And so if somebody is going like artillery and some infantry units, I'm just gonna make Naginata. Why bother with Yabasume unless they are only going with artillery,
Yeah, I mean, I've seen these things be used well, but I agree. It's definitely a niche unit. I feel like Japan, between flaming arrows and Naginatas, just running away with Ashigaru.
Yeah.
Like you don't really need this unit. You know what I mean? Like it's not a necessary thing. But then there are times when
there are definite times when it's super helpful for sure.
Exactly.
And for that reason alone, they don't deserve to go into D tier, but C for sure.
Yeah.
I think probably lesser than the Black Rider.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Like, so these are pretty, kind of units, but they are solid. I mean, we've all been smoked before by Yabusame just like deleting heavy cannons. It's like, oh, damn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they do okay against heavy cav, but again, Ashies.
All right, now speaking of niche, let's talk about the Cowboy and the Cuatrero. Now these guys are the Mexican and USA outlaw units that you get in the saloon. They are paired with the Bandito and Desperado, and for the Cuatrero, and the Gunslinger and what are they called? Alhoots? Yeah, Alhoots for USA. Now they both have like identical cost, identical HP, identical DPS. The only difference is their charge attack. Specifically speaking, the Cuatrero has basically a ranged attack that has the same range as its normal attack and snares enemies from range. It's called the Lasso. I think it might have a little bit of area of effect as well, but I'm not sure.
Yes.
And the Cowboy just has like an 18 range super shot, basically. And between the two, I can definitely say the Cowboys is the much better of the charged actions.
Yeah, of course the Cuatrero, if there's a huge mass of them, if it's into like an infantry blob, might be a little bit better, right? Because you want overkill and the area effect, but in general, yeah, charge attack, it just works smoother.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Not to mention, if I'm not mistaken, the Sheriff card for USA, I think impacts all charged actions, or is that just the Explorer's charged action?
I will look it up.
I'm not sure.
Is that a federal card, or is that a...
No, it's just a normal H2 card.
Okay.
It's like their Advanced Explorer, basically. Yeah, in any case, the USA ones are just better. Now, the problem with both of these is that they are pure coin costing outlaws. Now, they are the most resource efficient outlaws basically in the game, because they're like 110 coin. It's like 110, 120 coin, I think. Maybe 140, actually, for a fucking Dragoon. And most Dragoons cost 180 resources, They're also, available in Age 2, and that's a really big deal. Not all Dragoons are available in Age 2.
Or in the case of Mexico, should it choose
yeah.
Age 1.
Well, no, they can't make them in Age 1, but they have a card for it in Age 1 to make them available in Age 2.
That's how it works, okay. Ugh.
And, yeah, I think they belong in the C tier, because I feel like outlaws are not the prime. If you need Dragoons in Age 2 for USA, these will serve you better than the Carbine Cavalry will, because you don't have to send a shipment for them, and they have a really nice charged action that functions really, really well. And the same goes for Mexico. If you need an Age 2 goon, the Cuatreros will function better than your early Dragoon card will, right?
Yeah.
But there is something to be said for the fact that they cost like 5 population to start with each, and they cost nothing but coin, and they cost pretty hefty amounts of coin as well. And
Yeah,
I think they're in the C tier personally.
I've seen some amazing builds. Gideon with his Quateros and Jimmy or Captain Link with his Cowboys. But you have to build an entire strategy around this unit, right? Which would mean that if your opponent can figure it out, it's very risky. That being said, because they shadow tech, or no, they don't fully shadow tech. I think
you need to get a tech. No, you need to get a tech in the saloon that allows them to shadow tech in every age.
That's what it is. Okay. So, but very resource efficient. Gideon pulls off like fast Imperials sometimes. Captain Link has like a fast H4. So like these units can have uses, but it's so locked in and
yeah. Now there is something to be said
specific to it. That's like if you're fighting like an S tier skirm civ, like you're.
And I mean, it's not like these are the only units that you make when you lock in with the strategy. When you lock in with a Cowboy or Quatrero strategy, you also get the other outlaws, and you also get access to any age 2 mercenaries that you happen to roll in the saloon. And then once you get to age 3, you get access to all the mercenaries because you're already running a pure coin army with the strategy. So why not dip your toes into the mercenaries?
True.
And when I think about that, actually, I am reminded that pretty much all of USA's combat cards, US Army and Continental Rangers, affects like game-wide tags rather than specific named unit, and all of Mexico's upgrades affect specific named unit and not game-wide tags. And as such, I think that's another huge point in the Cowboys' favor over the Quatrero.
Yeah, again, I'm not an expert, honestly, in either of these units, and if either Gideon or Captain Link ever listen to this, or anybody else that likes tinkering with these units, leave comments. But I would say maybe the Cowboys a pinch better, but both of them to me they're C tier, not again because they're impossible to make use, but because you are so kind of specific, how you have to macro and send your card orders and how you go through the ages.
And another benefit in the Cowboys' favor is that USA has like 1 billion coin trickles. Okay, I just talked myself into giving Cowboy the bottom of B tier instead of top of C.
That's fair. Like, yeah, there's a really cracked out build there by Chibi or Captain Link that does like a fast industrial with the Cowboys, and it's pretty solid. You know what I mean? But you have to be specific to get all that pop space fast enough.
Yeah, but we have to be specific for any strategy, especially USA. USA is built on the niche.
So very,
USA is built on the niche and particular strats and builds. Is what I say.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good summary of it.
I really want to make a new Cowboy strategy. I haven't done like an outlaw Cowboy strategy in a while. All right, that's gonna be an upcoming video. Now I'm gonna make like a new a new modernized, taking all the changes into account, outlaw Cowboy strategy for USA. That's going to be coming up next. Or not next video, but like it's going to be coming up
soon. Trademark.
Soon. Trademark. Yes. All right, now let's talk about my 2 favorite units on this entire list, even if they're not the best units on this entire list. The Eagle Runner Knights and the Howdah. Which one do you want to start with?
Probably the Eagle Runner Knight, just because I think that's had a lot of changes. That's definitely negatively impacted.
Yes. So these guys used to be S tier. I don't think they're S tier anymore. Where it would land
on this tier list.
Yeah. I don't think these guys are S tier anymore. They've received a total of 10% nerf going from 30 to 20% in their range resistance. And they've also received a 0.75 multiplier against infantry, which really sucks. So, for reference, with 0.75, these guys have age 3 bases, which I think is a huge deal that people often forget. Is that the Eagle Runner Knight is based in age 3 instead of age 2. And what this means is that, unlike the Dragoon, for example, which even though it's not available until age 3 for most units, its base stats are in age 2, because some civilizations can get access to the Dragoon in age 2.
Yes.
Right, and because of that, this gives the Eagle Runner Knight a big leg up in terms of scalability into the endgame, because they are scaling off of higher bases. So every upgrade you give them they get more out of instead of compared to the other units, right? And that is a huge important detail in the Eagle Runner Knight's favor. However, they have 180 base HP and they have 30 attack. And if you take the 0.75 multiplier into account, what's 30 divided by 4? 7.5. They do 23.5 damage to Musketeers, right?
Yeah, something like that.
And Musketeers are going to do just as much damage right back to them. Basically, there's not going to be quite as high, but like these guys will. The thing about the Musketeer is that it's 50 food less than the Eagle Runner Knights. So these guys have gone from shredding Musketeers, which they used to do, into winning against them, but trading inefficiently in large numbers. And that is a big blow to the Aztec, because one of Aztec's biggest things is that you want to only take fights that you win. Because they don't have the economy that other civilizations have. They have an XP-based economy, which is weird, but it's a thing. Until you get to the late game and get like 1.45 food per second farms, then you can laugh in everybody's face. But the Eagle Runner Knights just is not what it used to be. It used to be insane because it was a 1-pop Dragoon that had more attack than 2-pop Dragoons, and a high HP count as well, in exchange for being as expensive as it can be. And they still have high DPS, and they still do shred everything that they can counter and that they can trade evenly against, which means these guys will win against artillery, even though they don't have a multiplier. They will shred Cav to pieces at 45 damage, with 45 damage per hit at 1.5 speed. It's really funny. They get extra range, and they will just shred goons because they have more attack, but at half the population. But they lose really hard against infantry now, and although they will win a fight with pretty much every other unit here, I generally think they have gone from being an S tier to a bottom of A tier units that I think is worse than the Javelin Riders, specifically because they're still not available in Age 2.
Yeah, I think that's a great summary of, like I said, all the changes. Not to mention too is Aztecs now even weaker to skirms. Like these things used to be.
No, actually, I think Aztecs are stronger against skirms overall because of the changes to the Coyote Runner.
Correct.
It's Aztec's weakness with this recent patch, and I play a lot of Aztec, by the way. But Aztec's weakness in this current patch has shifted from skirmishers to musketeers, because musketeers counter Eagle Runner Knight and Coyote Runners now.
Yeah, and slingers really are.
Yeah.
Fantastic. As a skirm unit themselves, or light infantry. Yeah, it's. I think bottom of A is fair. Like so, it's still an iconic unit. It's still an important unit for most of Aztec's compositions. But I think it was lopsided. He named his explorer. When in doubt, irk it out.
That's a great name.
And I just it's no longer what it was. That's for certain.
It's no longer the game-ending unit that it used to be.
Yeah.
All right, and lastly, the Howdah, which is my love and one of my most cherished units of all time. I love the Howdah, in case you didn't know or couldn't tell.
These are pretty solid. I don't know too much about India. I do know that.
Let me educate you. All right, but go ahead. Say what you want to say, and then you can.
I was just gonna say, like, I think the reason you don't see this more often is just because often the situations that India finds itself in, right, require it to tech into either mahouts or siege elephants. But these things are really good. Like when I see them, like they definitely punch quite a pack and pack quite a punch, and they're not bad units like by any measure. The reason you don't see these often, in my opinion, is less about like their raw stats. And you're right. Like I think in team games, they're a lot more commonly seen. In 1v1, it's just often people are going to hit you with, first they're going to hit you with Falcons, right? Because India's slower. And they might hit you with a lot of, they're better skirms because Gurkha aren't the best skirms. So you want Mahouts for that, and you want siege elephants to deal with the Falcons, and eventually it takes time to tech into these in 1v1, but
I'm gonna
they're
have some
good.
fun things to say in response. Okay, so I think, for one thing, you are right in that they paired with the Gurkha, which wasn't the craziest skirmisher in the universe. However, I think that Gurkha are much better after these recent patches than they used to be. With the primary reason being that the main reason that Gurkha weren't super good before is because their counter infantry rifling was tied to a shipment. But now with the changes now with the changes that make the spies, the surgeons, and the petards infinite shipments, the Gurkha has gotten a lot better. Because you actually want to send that counter infantry rifling card, because that card is also going to net you like 25 skirmishers now, or 40 or 80 skirmishers, depending on how long the game goes, just for free. And as such, I think the India skirmisher has gotten a lot better, which makes the India Dragoons a lot better, specifically with my own personal favorite being the Howdah. Now, allow me to educate you when it comes to India's elephant units. First of all, I think the Siege Elephant is ass, except for the 2 Siege Elephant shipment in Age 3. I think that one is really good. But the Siege Elephant as a unit itself, not about it. But elephants are the most single upgradable unit in the entire game. Because they actually have like more upgrades available to them than pretty much every unit in the game, and if you choose to go pure elephant, they will shred everything they touch. Because they get a 20% combat card in Age 3, right? They get in Age 3 they also get a cost reduction and population reduction card, if I'm not mistaken. Or no, it's just a cost reduction and train speed card. So they get more resource efficient with that one. They also get, there's also a monastery tech that gives them a 15% boost in melee, I think. Or no, it's just, I think it's 15% boost in all elephant melee. Then they also get another 15% melee from the derivative martial arts card. Because for when you teach your elephants how to do martial arts. Which, I mean, both of those techs affects the Mahout more so than the Howdah, but the Howdah has like 2 area of effect or something, or one area of effect, I think, in its melee attack, and it's got some pretty respectable melee too, which is a big point over the War Wagon, because, when Cavalry eventually close in on your War Wagon's kind of fucked, but Howdahs just switch to melee and they do just as well, because they have all these upgrades to them. So you have that's like 5 upgrades right there, or 4 upgrades, 5 upgrades, something like that. And then once you get to Age 4, there's professional handlers, which lowers their population cost, and one that raises their armor, and I think it gives them siege resistance too, which is insanely good.
It busts the resistances.
Yeah, it busts their armor across the board. I think to everything except melee. Actually, it might even give them melee resistance. I'm not sure what that card affects Howdahs really well, but it affects all the elephants really well. And then there's also Shavara's Tactics at the very end for just a 5% top buff, and then they get the Mansabdar on top of that. So elephants are like the single most upgradable unit class in the entire game. Like, no cap. Like, they actually have no cap. They just keep scaling. Unintentional pun.
Well played.
And even without all their upgrades, though, like, these guys pack such a big punch. India has a 2 Howdah shipment. I mean, that's like the equivalent of like 7-8 units. It's hilarious. But it's an insanely valuable card, and When you send it, those 2 howdahs by themselves will take care of like a lot of cavalry. It only takes like 3 shots to down a hussar. It's really funny. It might even take 2 depending on how highly upgraded they are, or like it definitely only takes 2 to fight an Ulan, for example, which is a really big deal. But then, when the enemy is like, oh no, fight the howdahs with the cav because, goons, melee, like war wagon syndrome, etc., and then they just switch to melee and kick their ass, And you're like, oh, you wanted to go into melee with my howdah? Joke's on you, that just means I get around your hussar's range resistance. And I rate the howdah way above the war wagon. I think the howdah is everything the war wagon wants to be.
I think it probably depends, like, on the modes, right? Like, probably in 1v1, I don't know if it's always viable to stack all those cards. Where the War Wagon basically needs cards that Germany's going to bring anyways.
Yeah, but do keep in mind that I mostly play team games. And my tier lists are based around supremacy as a whole, not just 1v1s. It's 1v1 and 2v2s.
Sure.
And even in 1v1s, they still have very powerful shipments. Like I was saying, the 2 howdah card, that's an insanely good card.
Oh yeah, no, Indian elephant shipments are really strong. That is definitely, I think, without dispute, right? Like the ability to send these very strong shipments that have huge population value.
And they all are food costing instead of water coin, which is even better.
Yeah. I mean? I think they're definitely an A tier. I'm definitely comfortable saying that. Like, I think the only thing holding them back is just the tempo of the Indian Civ and everything else kind of working together. Just cuts them a little bit short. Like if they had like an S tier skirm, or they just needed like some of those cards were collapsed into it, so you had like deck space all the time for it. I think it would be S tier without a doubt. Because like you said, I mean, they have really high base stats, so all those things like just scale. You know what I mean? Like it's just scaling and scaling and scaling.
I think if you look somewhere in the Discord, I think in the game info and numbers tab, you'll see like an exhaustive comparison I did between howdahs and dragoons in terms of which one is more resource and population efficient. That was a really interesting read, actually. But howdahs win, by the way. But
interesting.
Yeah,
I'll have to check that out. Yeah, no, that's definitely and I'm actually checking it right now in DevASD. Like, yeah, they're pretty solid. Like I said, with all the 4 cards.
4 cards and like a billion techs. Because you try out Derivative. Really good. I mean, there's Derivative and martial arts and the monastery tech as well.
Correct. I got that one. And do they not have ranged carousel somehow, or is there a way to get that?
No, India doesn't have a way to get that, unfortunately.
Okay, so I didn't miss that one.
But 16 range is still higher than most of these dragoons with carousel.
Correct. I mean, it's good. I mean, they're looking at, like I said, Shiravi's tactics and everything else added. Like, it's
like we were talking about how like war wagons struggle when it comes to kiting. But elephants struggle. The howdahs struggle with the same thing. They don't turn super quickly, and they also are not as fast as the other dragoons. The difference is they don't need to kite because you just switch them to melee, and then they win.
Their melee is pretty solid here. 68, 1 attack. So it's like fully upgrade. I mean, yeah, they're pretty solid compared to most goons, like I said.
Now, because they do have a very high like entrance cost, just because your first one takes, I think, like 250 food, 350 coin, or something like that. Because they have a very high like entrance cost, and they train slowly until you get some upgrades out on the fields, and they are locked till age 3. They're not going to be in the S tier. But I definitely think that they belong in like the middle to top of A tier. Not Rifle Rider and not Reuter status, but I generally think higher of them than I do of even France goons.
I could see that. I mean, yeah, I would say, like you said, like the entry cost and how long it takes, all that other stuff probably keeps them back a pinch, but these are
they're monsters.
They're not terrible. Looking at them right now, yeah, pretty solid. I'd say the only thing that keeps them probably back at all is the god awful elephant path.
Yeah.
Thing.
They even have
Seems
high
to be a
siege too.
persistent
I think
issue.
don't they have like 66 siege?
Yeah, they have. I mean, because they're melee attack, right?
Well, no, they have like a siege damage, but their siege animation is a melee. Yes.
Yeah, 123. Yes.
Yeah,
It's pretty good.
They even have
Pretty
high
damn good.
siege for dragoons.
Right? Because that's with 5 pop. Even if it's 6 pop, that's still higher than 10, right? We were just complimenting the which goon was that we are complimenting for the relatively high siege? I think it was the war wagon.
Yeah, the war wagon. It was the war wagon. I mean, these guys cost 6 pop, which isn't a huge amount of siege per population. It's definitely better than the war wagon, though, especially because you can actually reduce the population of these guys down to 5, which makes that number a lot more efficient.
Yes.
You know.
Yeah, these things are really.
I think that about does it. Looking at this list, do you see any changes that you would like to make?
I mean, I think it pretty much sums it up, right? Like, we've got a lot of variety within the tiers. Like I said, I think there is from B to S. These are all units that you kind of want to make. The only one that's kind of like a coin toss, obviously, was the rifle rider, but we explained like it's
such a good coin toss that like
yeah. I basically I'm content with it. Like I said, the Reuters you might see some people kind of disagree with, but I think again if you're Dutch, I mean let's be honest here, you don't have Musk. Your Huss aren't special. This thing could be F tier, and you're going to be building a whole bunch of them, and they're so freaking annoying. Like that's got to count for something.
Yeah.
Like they're just so annoying. But other than that, I think there's been a good rationale for every single tier. I mean, I don't think there's anything too out of the blue. But
okay.
I'm sure there will be somebody in the comments.
Yeah.
It's like no.
Comment section, when it's time for you to complain about my list, I just want you to know I wanted to put Reuters in S tier, but Platypus said no.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much for watching, gentles and ladymen.
Still my heart beats again and again. I'm always searching for love with no sense within my head. Till that day when I see that I met the most amazing demon ever yet.